and welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul-led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Miller. Thank you for joining me today, and if you're listening to this around the time that it's released, Happy New Year! As we wind up one year and begin a new one, I thought it was the perfect time to release this first episode of the Mystic Dog Mama Spotlight series, where I shine the spotlight on other Mystic Dog Mamas and their stories with their dogs. My very first guest in this series is such a beautiful and amazing soul, and I'm so excited to introduce you to her. Gigi Silverman is an award-winning author of fiction and poetry, as well as a visual artist, educator, and writing coach. Her writing has recently been shortlisted for the 2023 Dzanc Short Story Collection Prize, and her manuscript, The Bloodier Daughter, was recently named a finalist for the 2023 St. Lawrence Book Awards. I mean, she really is amazing. Gigi also describes herself as disabled, neurodivergent, and the daughter of immigrants, all of which have informed her path. She lives just north of Seattle with her husband and their amazing rescue dog, Edie, who was formerly paraplegic and now lives fiercely with a spinal disorder. When not obsessing over her writing, art, or her dog, Gigi enjoys yoga, gardening, cooking, and traipsing through the evergreen forests of the Pacific Northwest, searching for magic and medicine. To find out more about Gigi and her work, you can visit her website, gigisilverman.com. I've left a link to this in the show notes. In this conversation, Gigi and I talk about the role of everyday creativity and its role in the spiritual paths we're walking with our dogs. We also explore the ways in which our dogs invite us to let in more magic into the everyday and ask us how we can become even better versions of ourselves. She and I share a love of the mystical and have both embraced the path of the hedge witch, a path which seeks the magic and medicine in everything we encounter, including belly rubs. Gigi talks about finding love notes from the universe, and it's my hope that as we enter into this new year, that this conversation is one such love note for you, reminding you that magic is indeed everywhere, and your dog is right by your side, helping you sniff it out. Before we dive in, just a quick note that this episode is supported by Aspirationary, which, in full transparency, is another project of mine. At Aspirationary, we make books, notebooks, and stationery to help you become all you aspire to be. You can check out our shadow work and moon magic journals and workbooks on Instagram at Aspirationary, which is spelled ASPIRATIONERY. Okay, here we go. All right. Today's guest is Gigi Silverman, and I am so excited to have you on the Mystic Dog Mama podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited that I get to chat with you again.
Oh, I know. This is just such a treat. And to give a little bit of a background, part of what I'm doing with Mystic Dog Mama is I am talking to various professionals about various aspects of how we nourish ourselves and our dog's mind, body, and soul, but I'm also creating opportunities to spotlight some other mystic dog mamas. And when I thought about doing that, Gigi, you were one of the first people that I thought, oh, this will be so much fun. So I'm really grateful that you're joining me on this little adventure.
I love that I have that reputation. So fun. Can't wait to dig in.
You do have that reputation. And I just wanted to give a shout out as well to our mutual friend, Michelle, who introduced us. And actually, as I was talking to her about what I'm doing with Mystic Dog Mama, she was like, you totally need to talk to Gigi. And I was like, you know what? I really, really do. So thank you, Michelle, again for connecting us.
Love her and miss her so much. Someday we will be in the same state.
I know. Can you imagine the three of us in the same state? That would be amazing. What would happen?
Party.
I know.
Love it.
I know. And just to kind of give the audience an idea as well of why I wanted to invite you on before I ask you to kind of introduce yourself is we have a shared background in the arts. And something I've been really excited to talk to you about is the role of creativity in our lives and kind of broadening that as well for people beyond just like the practicing artist, the one who's gone to art school or anything like that. And how we can have a conversation about what like everyday creativity looks like and how that plays out on our own personal and spiritual paths that we are walking with our dogs. So that will be something that we bring up. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself a little bit.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, as Alexia mentioned, I'm Gigi, restating the obvious. I am a visual artist and writer. Like those are the hats that I wear, the primary hats. I'm also a creative writing instructor. I was a graphic designer for about 25 plus years, and I am looking to shift into a different phase with that. But I consider myself an overall creative person, writing, art, cooking, whatever brings me the juice and the joy to live my life fully. That's what I love. I'm a
Mm,
gardener, just all of that. So,
yeah.
and a dog
Yeah.
mother,
Obviously.
obviously.
And who and tell us about the little pup in your life.
So, my dog is a French Bulldog named Edie. And what can I say? French Bulldogs are currently the number one dog in America. However, I did not get her because I was trying to be trendy by any means. I rescued her. And I say this is an important distinction because right now I know that people are lining up by the hundreds to unfortunately let go of their French bulldogs due to the horrendous breeding
Mhm.
issues and the severe health issues they have. And that is basically how I came into possession of my dog. She had become paralyzed, and her former owner could not take care of her. And she was put into rescue, rehabbed, and adopted out. And we are the lucky family that was chosen. But yeah, we got her when she was 5. She's 8 now, but the 3 years we've had her have been honestly incredible. Like, she has changed my life. So I'm so grateful to have her in my
Mm,
world.
Can you talk a little bit about that? About how
Yeah.
she's changed your life?
Yeah. It's so funny because all of my dogs have had such distinct personalities. She is very, very, very social. She loves people, in contrast to my last dog, who had a history of abuse and just really needed a lot of space, which I absolutely 100% respected. But she kind of goes wilty if she doesn't get enough people. So she has really kind of pushed our social edges further outward, which became so important in the pandemic. We got her toward the tail end of the first year of the pandemic. And she's one of those rare Frenchies that actually likes to walk, because you see those videos of them pouting online and they're like,
Yeah.
no, no, no. She loves to walk and she loves to meet people. And so she would insist that if there was even a shadow of a person down the road, that we would like chase them like a heat-seeking missile, which is a little awkward and embarrassing. Like, my dog really needs to meet you. Sorry. I know this is creepy. I'm stalking you, but this is happening. But she has brought us so many friends and wonderful relationships, that I can't even. I just feel like my life is so much better for the people she's brought me. Like, it's almost like she came with this hidden unfolding universe of people. Like, she's more than just a dog. She's like amazing parallel universe.
The Edieverse.
It's so weird to say, but it's so true.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing because I actually have the opposite experience with Lucky in terms of him, again, being a pandemic pup, got him towards the beginning of the first year of the lockdown, and it was during his peak socialization window. So he saw nothing, didn't see anybody, and so consequently is really afraid. And he sees people and is like, he goes the other way. But what that's actually done has been a mirror for me as well, to be honest, of where am I not wanting to be close to people? Where am I being resistant? Where am I putting up various walls? And so, in a sense, he's become like my little shadow work opportunity, showing me. And the more I found too that, I mean, some of it is his age, that because he's 3 now, that the more we do things, the more comfortable he gets with things. But it's a real reminder for me to be very present in my own energy when we're out and not be like on the lookout for potential triggers, which, as the mom of a reactive dog, that is what so many of us experience. Like, you're just like mission impossible, like do, like where is something that could possibly set him off? And so it's been a real um just a real lesson for me in reflecting on my own energy around people, for sure.
I went I went through a similar journey to yours with my last dog who, I mean, I think he'd been crated for the better part of 7 years. So when
Oh my
he came
God.
out, like literally the sight of like an older man would cause him to almost like jump out in the street to get away off of the
Um,
sidewalk and just take a wide berth. But then, oncoming traffic, excuse me. So yeah, we had to do probably like a couple of years of desensitization training for
mhm,
everything.
mhm,
So the one thing that I noticed is exactly what you said, was watching my energy and really being in the moment and going, okay, am I radiating fear down the leash?
mhm,
Or am I radiating confidence and
mhm.
calm and joy? And he picked up on that after a while. And then in the course of a few years, you know, an aggressive dog could bark like within feet of him in his face and he wouldn't crumple. He would just stand there and
Wow.
go, okay, sure.
Wow. Oh, that gives me hope. That gives me hope. We're still
It's
working on that.
possible.
Okay.
It's possible. Hang in there. It takes a while.
I'm very glad to hear that. My goodness. Oh, amazing. Amazing. And I know that you mentioned that you've been experiencing health challenges with Edie. What has come up with you for that?
So she has invertebral disc disease. It's often referred to as IVDD for short. And as I understand it, I may be wrong on this, but I think it can be a degenerative condition. So she has a pretty severely deformed spine, which is very common with Frenchies. Like if you ever look at a X-ray for a Frenchie, you'll see that a lot of their bones are like wedge shaped, they're twisted, they're humped. I mean, they look
Mhm,
pretty horrible.
mhm.
Um, and so she also she's very prone to slipping discs very easily. And so that's what happened in August of this past year. She slipped a disc, and at the same time, she had an autoimmune process attacking her spinal cord. So she basically lost the ability to walk for a very short time and had to basically go into very strict confinement for rest and had to go on immune suppressing drugs so her spine would not be under attack. She's doing much better now. She's walking more, still has a little bit of a neuro tremor, but she can walk and do stuff and live her life. So yeah, we just have to, it's a slow progression, but start ramping in the therapy, ramping in exercise. And I have to say, this is like where I thank all the people that have worked with her so far, because we started her on acupuncture years ago. in physical therapy ages ago, and if it weren't for the work that we were doing, she would have been way worse off with this flare up. So apparently, with IVDD, um, physical therapy extends their prognosis and protects them from further damage. So,
Hmm.
had we not been doing the work and getting her a lot healthier, this could have been a much more catastrophic episode. So, I
Hmm.
cannot say enough good things about, you know, my dog's physical therapist and her acupuncturist and all of those people. So, it really
Absolutely.
helps.
Absolutely. I talk to a lot of people around embracing a lifestyle of preventative care as well, so that it's not about when something happens that we just start to look at what are the supplements, what are the things that I can throw in, but actually how can you stop a lot of that from happening by making sure that you are building up the body in a holistic manner. So meaning like you're looking at the dog's overall environment, even in terms of like one of the things that I'm conscious of with Lucky is he early on in his life showed kind of issues around his kidney. And so I'm very conscious about what is it that I'm using as far as a cleaning product, making sure that I'm not lighting synthetic candles, for example, because all that stuff gets released into the environment and then he's got to actually process it out. So what it's done for me is again with him being a kind of mirror and a reflection, looking at what are the things that I'm putting into his environment, but consequently, that's my environment, and so how am I better taking care of myself as a result of looking at creating as safe a space for him as possible?
Isn't
Yeah,
that amazing how we become much more self-aware and self-healing as a result
totally,
of our animals? Wonderful.
totally, totally. And I actually think from a spiritual perspective that dogs are sent to us. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they are the animal that became domesticated and prefers to like live with us, and that they have the biggest heart in terms of body mass of any animal. Like they are very heart centered beings, and we are heart centered beings. And I really believe that where we're at in the kind of cosmology of the day is we're being asked to step more into our hearts and live from our hearts. And practically speaking, I think that looks like moving away from fear. How do we make decisions and see the world from a place that's much more loving versus out of fear? And I think when we invite a dog into our home, or rather they choose us as their humans, however that kind of comes about, that it really is an invitation for us to dive deeper into that work. And we may start the process of living that way through wanting to take care of our dogs. So it seems like it's a kind of transferal of that loving energy. But in reality, it mirrors right back to us. And anything that we are putting out there is a reflection of what is in us, and it comes back to us. So I think they are just, I mean, I talk about it all the time. Like I don't even think it's possible for me to express the amount of gratitude that I have for Lucky and what he has done for me in my life. Like there will never be a possibility of expressing it. It's just so huge. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, my first dog who passed away, wow, over a decade ago at this point,
Mm.
she needed so much exercise, and I needed exercise, but I was ignoring that about my life and pushing myself and my business to the point of burnout, and 12 to 14-hour days were the norm.
Hmm.
And if it wasn't for her saying, "Excuse me," sitting behind me and boring her eyesight into the back of my skull saying, "You don't take me out to the park. I'm gonna stomp on you when you're sleeping." I'm pretty sure that was what she was thinking. But, she forced me to respect my own body just by getting out and taking her out. And then I was like, oh, it feels good to not be in front of the computer all day. Wow, I needed a 3 apples tall animal to tell me that. Could have just figured it out myself, but no.
But we're so conditioned. I mean, especially like that, the burnout culture is a real thing. It really is a real thing. And we get conditioned from our culture that and rewarded and validated for being hardworking and for self-sacrificing in many respects. And the gift of the dog is that they are so embodied and present that they remind us to do the same. That I used to joke with a friend of mine that this is such a sick thing actually, but like we would actually see like how long at work we could hold our pee. It sounds crazy, but like, could we be the person that could go all day without peeing and just get the work done, sort of thing? Like, where that mentality comes from. But that's a real thing. And when you have a dog, that's not an option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you hear the stories of, like, Amazon workers wearing Depends so they don't have to pull
Yeah.
over or whatever, and I
Yeah.
know it's a rumor, Amazon, please don't sue me, but anyway, you know, I have a friend who did, construction road work for a while, and she said, "Yep, we would wear Depends and we would pee our pants because we were doing road work," and that was that, and I was like, "Okay, wow, that's
Hmm.
the culture that we have built," and, yeah, I'm a lot more aware now with my own health problems and paying attention to my dog and her needs. Like, I've been asking myself a lot more, like, why do I sometimes deny myself a simple thing like a bathroom break right when I need it? Like, why? I work from home, like, there's no reason not to. There's no one breathing down my neck, but we have internalized this strange kind of martyrdom
Hmm.
our capitalist overculture.
Yeah.
Brutal.
It is brutal. It is really brutal. And I think it's like one of the kind of diseases, the dis-ease of our time. Truly.
Mhm. Agreed.
Yeah. And I think our dogs are great reminders for that's not normal or natural. And it's not how we actually get ahead, like
Uh-huh.
it's
Yeah,
really, really asking us to question like what is important to us. Yeah.
most definitely. And I feel bad for the dogs that are kind of forced into the unhealthy lifestyle by folks who are still kind of wrapped up in that mentality and culture and like the neuroses that they're getting and perhaps the disallowal. I don't know if I just made up a word, but just not being allowed to do what they need to do
Yeah.
and be who they need to be. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's an interesting struggle that I'm sure is out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think this is kind of perfect that we're talking about this stuff because I think a lot of people can really benefit from this conversation. And I just wanted to bring up that um, I was both super nervous and super excited to talk to Gigi because I was like, oh my God, there's so many things I want to talk to her about. How am I going to condense it into an hour? And so part of what I did as like my little strategy was I drew some cards because why not draw on some tarot and some oracles uh, to guide us through this. And so before I started the session with her, I drew a couple cards. And so those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can actually see the cards, but I'll describe them. I drew from the Tarot of Mystical Moments, I believe it's called. And I'll put links in the show notes for anybody that's interested in seeing these cards. I drew the Five of Wands. And from the Animal Spirit Oracle deck by Kim Krantz, I drew the Sea Serpent. And the Sea Serpent specifically talks about creativity and and the expression of our desires and owning what it is that we want, but also especially with like the Five of Wands accompanying it. Five of Wands is often seen as a card of conflict, but in my kind of view of it, it is it arises from those internal conflicts where we're kind of battling with ourselves around what we are seeing in the external in terms of the conditioning, etc., and how we are making sense of that for ourselves and where we feel that kind of rub that something's not quite right. And so, where are we making decisions from? Where are we taking actions from? Whose voice is in our head that's dictating that, all of that? And I think it's such an important thing to start to look at. One, to even realize like you are not your thoughts. I think that's a really helpful thing to kind of help with that separation. But also, like you were saying, Gigi, to like really get honest with ourselves and what is it that we are desiring from a very basic level of like, I need to go to the bathroom or like, and how that then extends to like the greater things, like what do we want in our lives? What does that look like? And how do we give ourselves permission to actually explore that? And I wanted to kind of ask you about those sorts of rubs in that process that you go through in your creative work, not only like as a graphic designer, but a visual artist, a writer. Like, how do you deal with that? How do you explore that? And also, do you notice any difference in the processes that you go through in each of those kind of areas? You're muted, just to let you know.
Sorry.
That's okay.
That is a really big question. So would you like me to respond in terms of like how the cards influence that, or
However you want to take it. Your
okay.
choice, creative choice.
Interesting, interesting. I love that you drew cards. I'm a big fan of working with cards. A few years ago, I had the luck to study with Clarissa Pinkola Estes,
No
Women Who
way.
Run with the Wolves. By the way, this is something that other people can do. She has these workshops, and anyone can register, and it's a life-changing experience. If you have the opportunity to do so, I
Oh
think
my
you
goodness.
should. It tends to be her workshops tend to be attended by lots of women, but for the men out there, you are also welcome. And in fact, you are celebrated if you do attend. So it's for everyone. Please go. But she is, I think, one of the world's leading Jungian analysts, and she works with imagery in her work and how archetypes can heal us and influence us, and how we can use those as springboards for our own authentic storytelling. So I'm always tickled when someone says they pulled a card before we get together or during the gathering. So I'm like, yes, please. I'm a little bit of like a, you know, hedge witch. I'm just this close to running for the hedges right now.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Mm-hmm.
because of you, but because of society. Just wanted to clarify that. It's nothing you did. Um,
Well, I am a practicing hedge witch, so you can come join me.
boom,
Yeah,
boom. We'll have our own little hedge witch camp.
I love
Sounds
it.
fantastic. Um, yeah, so there's a lot of juice in there. I'm gonna try to be succinct if it's possible. Uh, wow. So you drew the Five of Wands,
Mhm.
the sea serpent.
Yeah, I'll hold them up again. I love the image. Is it? I hope it's not kind of too reflective.
I
These are
can
really
see
gloss
it.
cards.
Yeah, so it almost looks like chess pieces
Yeah,
of
it's a woman whose
mm,
dress is actually the chessboard, and she's got all these pieces that are kind of like
oh,
shoulders that she's moving around.
that is so clever. That is
It's
beautiful. I
this
love
deck,
that.
and I am not sponsored by this deck whatsoever, but like,
Sure.
I love this deck. It's just beautiful. And for those of us who are into the kind of into the mystical, which for me, and I would love to hear your take on the mystical, but like for me, it's all about the mystery and allowing it's again kind of like what I have experienced with hedge witchcraft, which is like a foot in both worlds all the time, where you see the magical in this every day. It's not about escaping it, but it's about allowing more of the magic into the everyday, which is just a shift in perception, right? It's a lens change. But I love these kinds of decks that very much play on the imagination and using imagination as our link to our spiritual self. That there is no distinction in that regard. So I'm a big fan.
Absolutely.
I'm
Yeah,
a
I
big
love
fan.
that. I love, and that's what I've been trying to do with my life for, like, the last 5 years, is really reconnect with the awe and the magic of every day. I mean, we're
Mhm.
we're literally surrounded by these incredible processes and wonder, and we have the ability, the powerful ability, a largely untapped ability to enhance that wonder and manifest that wonder and participate in the co-creation of that wonder. And that's where I'm trying to find my own sweet spot as a human. Like, how do I acknowledge what's there and then enhance with my own gifts? But, yeah, it's so interesting, like, when you look at the 5 of Wands and you look at the very original, well, not the very original, but the Rider-Waite-Smith version of that card where you see a lot of people, holding their wands kind of, I guess, crossing each other, and then the card that you pulled, which seemed to have more characters not necessarily obviously in opposition,
Mhm.
but, they could be seen as potentially weights, like they're pressing down on her gown. But,
Mhm.
what I like is looking for the silver lining in cards and saying, "Okay, like, what is the negative human bias say? And then how do I say, no, I don't have to follow the mass thinking of negativity bias, right? So if we were to look at the original
Yeah.
card, you see people that supposedly are at odds with each other. But what if they meant to cooperate and build a wall
Exactly.
of sticks, right? So what's the intention? What are they protecting? What are they doing? And
Mhm.
so, you know, reframing situations is something that I always get from that card. And when you look at the card that you pulled, are they weights? Are those allies or advisors?
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
Right. And so and that's kind of a big thing that I'm looking at in my own life right now. I had the luck to study permaculture, and one of the things that we look at in permaculture is um, basically what are the quote unquote problems that you're working with, but we don't think of them as problems. We think of them as parameters, right? Like, what are the challenges, and then how do we work with the challenges? Um, Say you only have X materials and you need to do a thing, like, how do you work with what you have?
Right.
And so that has been honestly a huge shift in my own life as a creative, where before I was always trying to find more hours in a day,
Mhm.
which we know there aren't, and we know that we need a certain amount of sleep and we need a certain amount of nourishment, and trying to work against what is natural is actually really painful.
Mhm.
And so realizing that you only have so much time and you only have so much energy and so much health, what do you focus on? What's important? How do you optimize what you have and really celebrate that, and use that as a framework for your life and your creativity? And that's been just hugely powerful for me. So yeah, I really love looking at it through that reframing perspective, and just
Absolutely.
respecting our natural limitations.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, I have not fully studied permaculture. I'm kind of working my way through a course. But one of the things that I have really enjoyed about permaculture is that it is a whole lifestyle, right? It's a perspective and it's not about gardening. So, a lot of people think like, oh, it's just a gardening thing. It's really not. It's a way of being with the world and how you are in the world. And even that perspective around permaculture, that so if you are doing planting and gardening, but before you do any of that, observe for an entire year, see what's already going on, see the relationships, see the rhythms, that sort of a thing. So there's also this shift in a power dynamic that occurs for me in thinking about this, where it's not about like me going in as like man and dominating, but it's more about that, really, like you're alluding to, like with the card, the other side of the five of wands, of like, how do I collaborate? How do I see myself as part of an ecosystem that already exists? What is my role within that ecosystem? And it's something that I've been thinking about, like, even in terms of like part of how I got into the permaculture thing was really being interested in systems and climate change, but then also looking at like, how does this work on an everyday level with how I'm engaging with my dog? And what I mean by that is that I started to look at like the kind of the problematic elements of, for example, the amount of agricultural land and use and waste, et cetera, that's devoted to the dog industry, to making dog food, et cetera. And the fact that I've got a little carnivore that lives with me and intensely, reared, like he requires meat. And I should say, like, as somebody who is studying canine nutrition, I am of the perspective that dogs are carnivores. They are not omnivores. They are facultative carnivores, which means that they derive the majority of their nutrition from animal sources. And so having to take on that responsibility, that I've brought this little mini wolf into my home, and he requires this. So how am I on some levels participating in and kind of like complicit in some of the issues that surround that, and how can I make better decisions, so that there's a real practical side of it to me, and it's not about kind of like judging myself or getting too down or whatever. It's just asking myself, how am I playing a part in these ecosystems, and where on some small level can I make a change towards the vision that I would like to see, that's maybe a more collaborative ecosystem. So I wonder how you feel about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, 100%. When I was going through the permaculture program through the Permaculture Women's Guild, I was really realizing that my relationship with my animal was actually a huge part of, kind of like a I mean, not a huge part, but a significant part of, you know, maybe like what the larger culture is doing, like everything from, what are we doing with animal waste
Mhm.
and food and, you know, toys and medicine and like what and just how they interact with the environment, like pesticide use.
Right.
Um, I just know so many people whose dogs have gotten cancer. And a lot of these same people also spray pesticides in their yard.
Mhm.
And so, you start making those connections and it's really enlightening and eye-opening and it makes you think, okay, wow, there are things that maybe I haven't paid attention to before, and not to beat myself up, but how can I pay attention to these issues going forward and then create a healthier, lifestyle for us? And then how does that spill out into the world? Because it does. So yeah, there you'll see in my permaculture plan that I had to turn in for my final certification, like, you'll see all my little dog photos and little things that I'm incorporating for her. So yeah, it's really honestly eye-opening
Mm-hmm.
to to really care for an animal and then think about your environmental impact and just how that all feeds into a holistic world.
Mm-hmm. It really is. And there is no one solution. So I don't think it's about finding an answer, but more about asking the questions and being aware of the questions that we need to be asking and then experiment, see what happens. What happens when you make a little shift? Um, yeah, but I think it's important things. They are important questions that we need to be asking, and I think it's one way that we as individuals can empower ourselves to affect change instead of feeling at the mercy of like big corporations or governments or what have you, that actually on a very small level we can contribute to the ecosystem in which we live and create positive change.
Most definitely. I actually think that studying permaculture and also having an animal honestly are some of the biggest things that have helped me feel empowered and pull myself out of depressive funks where I have maybe felt disempowered and not able to make an impact. But now that I know what I know and can know that I can continue to learn, I feel so much better, but also a little bit powerful. Like, yes, there are solutions.
Hmm.
Like, yes, I can figure out how to make things better. And I'm not crazy enough to think I can change the whole world with what I'm doing, but I know that I can have an impact on my little corner,
Right.
and that is enough. And those I know that those changes like ripple out when my
Hmm.
friends are like, "Oh wow, I see that you did X. Oh, I want to learn how to do that." Or I've been really growing a lot
Yeah.
of my own fruit this year, and right
Ah,
now
nice.
just enjoying the spoils of the best apple you've ever tasted. And people are like, "Well, I want that." And I'm like, "Well,
Yeah.
let me welcome you into my world." Twirl my little evil mustache here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it is that thing of like you do it and you model. It's you make the change by you being you, by you being authentic with who you are, and other people gravitate towards that because you become the light, as you were saying, like you're making the change in your little corner of the world, but you were the light in your corner of the world, which is just beautiful.
I love that. I love that. I don't know if you saw this at all, but every year I pick a word for the year
Mhm.
to kind of be my guidepost, as it were. And this year, my word was shine. And
Oh,
so, whenever I feel, and I do have a tendency to feel this way at times, whenever I feel like literally I want to hide, I don't
mhm.
want to put myself out there, I don't want to do a thing, I go, "Oh, remember that word
Oh,
that
I
you
love that.
chose.
I
How
love
do
that.
how do I live up to that?" So I'm like, "Okay, shine. All right, let's be our best self today. What can we do to be our best self today?" So
Yeah.
it kicks
Yeah.
my butt some days, but it's good.
Oh, I love it. So what is your process for deciding what the word of the year is?
I think it's kind of just a gut intuitive,
Mhm.
stream of consciousness, like just what is bubbling to the surface.
Mhm.
Um, I wish I had a cooler answer, like, "Ooh, like, I wish I pulled from a deck or something," but
No, that's
no, it's just really stream of consciousness.
oh, I love it. I love it. So do you have a kind of practice, maybe a daily practice or however often you do it that you would consider a spiritual or mystic practice, and how do you understand those terms?
I it kind of shifts for me
Mhm.
as situations allow. For a long time, I was doing daily yoga and incorporating, you know, my meditation, my intention setting into that. Things have shifted a little bit for me, so I'm not doing daily yoga anymore, or at least, excuse me, at this time.
Mhm.
But before I go to sleep at night, I basically do a similar thing. Excuse me, I need to silence my phone. Sorry.
That's all right.
um, just um, yeah, so at night I have a little meditation that I say, and it's very similar to what I was doing in daily yoga, but it is I connect with my ancestors, my spirit guides, and I just ask them to watch over me. And I envision my home and my beloved people surrounded by protection. And yeah, I just ask that I am inspired to be a light. And sometimes when I do yoga, I will do it outside. And I literally have this practice that I have borrowed from Aboriginal culture where I face the sun and I open my mouth and I swallow sunlight. And I literally say, I take the fire inside myself, let it, I forget what I say. It's Friday. Basically, the point is, I want the fire to burn away what I don't need, right? It's
Mm.
like a spiritual cleansing. And then to warm up and light up what is useful and necessary. And so, literally, I swallow the fire,
Mm.
or figuratively, metaphorically, looking for words today. So I that is a thing that I do when I get to be outside and do my yoga, but I always meditate on a light source and say, "Let me bring this inside myself." And yeah, I also like to connect with plant beings. So if I'm out and about on my daily walks, like those are really meditative and spiritual for me. And I'm always thinking about, right, what is the medicine here? Or if I have an animal sighting, what is the medicine here? I'm a big believer in the idea of kind of a holographic universe, and also in a semiotic universe that everything's communicating. It's all
Mm.
symbols, it's
Mhm.
all some kind of language. And so I'm just opening my awareness to what is being said right now. Like, what do I need to learn right here and now? And some days a walk is just a walk, and other days it's, wow, I just had a big revelation on something important. And so it's not necessarily like beating myself up when I don't have those revelations, but just staying open to whatever spirit is I encounter on the road.
Mhm.
And then in terms of artistic practice, I love just I keep some really, fun symbols on my desk to kind of meditate on, and just be aware that wherever I am is an opportunity for magic and spirit. So, gosh, that felt like a lot.
Oh,
I'm
that's
sorry if I
beautiful.
overwhelmed you.
No. Oh my God, I love it. I love it. I love
Thank
it.
you.
Oh, that is so beautiful. So beautiful.
Thank you.
I resonate with everything you just said. 100%. And part of how I ended up going into studying the practice of hedge witchcraft and how I kind of understand that and define that for myself is a nature based spiritual practice in which I feel it very informed by animism, meaning that seeing that everything is alive, everything has a spirit, everything has a story, a message, and not just for me, but again, going back to that ecosystem perspective, that everything is playing a role. And so it becomes about coming into congruent relationship with everything. So, not trying to dominate it, but trying to recognize my own role in relation to these things. And so it puts me in the position of observer and questioner. So, not assuming that I know and not assuming that I have more um, power or more of a right to be here or more of an intelligence or any of that kind of stuff than the things that I'm encountering. But like you're saying, what is the medicine that we are all medicine. Everything is medicine. You don't have to go and do an ayahuasca ceremony, right? Like everything is medicine. And seeing it from the perspective of healing oneself is healing everything else and vice versa. So again, it goes back to a lot of like the hermetic principles too, of like as above, so below, as within, so without, all of that kind of stuff. And so where are the things that I'm encountering in my day reflecting back to me where I need to pay attention to certain things or where I'm on the right track with certain stuff. And so and again, with the hedge witch stuff, it's about having one foot in both worlds all the time. So seeing the magic, as you're saying, and I'm describing magic, and I'd like to hear your perspective on this. I'm seeing magic as that life force that runs through everything, through that consciousness that runs through absolutely everything. And engaging with it and working with it intentionally is like, so when you're doing magic, it's like you've alluded to before, it's putting the intention into something, it's putting the focus into something with the idea that you are engaging, you are co-creating with it. So not for me, it's not about trying to manipulate something into a particular form, but it's more, how do I engage with this thing that's in front of me? And we co-create something new and see what that is, and kind of like the joy of that. But always going back to the sense of right relationship.
Yeah, I love what you said about everything being medicine and, tying into magic and this idea of co-creating. What I've come to understand about myself is perhaps in the past I would try to force an outcome,
Hmm.
right? And just throw myself at a thing that wasn't happening. It's not happening. It's not happening. I'm grinding myself to a pace. It's not happening. And then realizing, maybe that wasn't meant for me.
Mm.
Maybe that's not like literally not just from a place of internally not meant for me, but in terms of like a larger spiritual hollow sphere, like maybe literally that is not what the universe wants me for. Like
Hmm.
maybe I'm a conduit, guide, pair of hands for some other force or
Yeah.
action. And looking at that has been incredibly powerful for me. Like, first off, maybe I'm not getting so sad, stressed out about
Yeah.
things that are just like, I can't force, how this outcome is going to be. But what can I do? What is syncing? What's flowing? What's feeling good? How are all of those things working together? And so, yeah, it's such an interesting lifelong journey, and I don't know that on the day that I die that I'll have all the answers, but it's
Hmm.
such a beautiful path to follow. Like I feel like it gives me so much richness to
Yeah.
enjoy.
Yeah. And along with that too, I mean, I can absolutely relate, and I think most of us can, to like desiring an outcome and then pushing, 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 and like how high vibe can I get, and how having my vision board, and like I'm gonna make this happen, and no matter what you do, it just doesn't come pass. And I think that there's a process that most of us go through, which is not a comfortable process, which is of the surrender. And for me, that surrendering is, it's not a giving up. It's not a defeatist kind of perspective, but it's a loosening, it's a softening. And at the heart of it for me is, maybe I don't know what's best from this little perspective, from this small self perspective. Maybe I think I want that thing, that experience, that outcome. But in reality, maybe that's not best for me. And maybe it's not best for the whole. Because I definitely look at life sort of generally, kind of like my worldview on this tends to be that we are all threads in a tapestry. And again, it goes back to that ecosystem perspective. We're all collaborating on some level to create this big thing. But like from the perspective of my little thread, I can't get far enough back to see what is the overall tapestry. I don't know. So maybe I should just trust that there's a little bit of information coming from like the weaver, like the big weaver that has a bit of a better idea of what the design is, and work with that instead of this constant pushing, fighting that I think, again, going back to the kind of like overarching capitalist culture, we are taught, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, make things happen, go out. And for some people, that is more in their energy flow of going and making things happen in that way. But I think for most of us, that isn't the case. And where are we getting those nudges? And sometimes it takes like a cosmic 2x4 of like illness or something, like where the universe is like,
I felt that.
Right?
Ouch.
More than once. You would have thought the first time would be enough, but it's like, no, how many times? How many times?
100%. Yeah, I love what you said about tapestry and threads. And I mean, I don't know if it's because we live in modern times and we have so much technology, and there's a lot of instantaneousness to our technology and our ability to do things. But we have to remember that we are literally part of a process that unfolded thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
A decision somebody made thousands of years ago is unfolding now. And that it kind of blows your mind to think that way, that, literally we are just specks in a process. And it kind of gives me a measure of comfort when I feel like, oh, why isn't this going my way? And I'm like, oh, because there's a whole machine in place.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of also reaffirms my kind of like fringy, head witchy ideas, because, a lot of the exciting, new, wonderful things that happen in culture happen along the edges. Like, what are those weird countercultural things that don't have the huge machines
Mm-hmm.
in place? Like, how do we lean into that and build community and threads around that? So that's kind of the exciting space that I like to explore. What are those weird
Absolutely.
edges that no one's ginormous structures around? Like, maybe I might not get published by a huge publishing house, but what kind of impact can I have pulling together a weird,
Totally.
small zine or something? So,
Totally. There is, I believe she's an anthropologist, and her name is Anna Singh. I think it's Tsing, who she wrote a book that was all about mushrooms. And in particular, the matsutake mushroom, which is very, very prized in Japanese culture. And part of why it's prized is because it can't be domesticated. It just can't, it's not a cultivate. Anytime you try to cultivate it, it doesn't work. So it grows at certain times and certain points, certain types of climates and stuff when it wants to. And so people become attuned, people who are like the sort of hunters, the foragers of this, have this innate knowing of, it's almost like they can sniff it out, right? They're feeling the vibration of where like a patch is growing or whatever, and they just sort of know and they gravitate towards it. But the way she was talking about it too was that it serves as a model, as a reflection for, like you're saying, where we live in a culture that prizes scalability. How do you take something and then make it in a form that it can be replicated over and over and over and bigger and bigger and bigger? But the reality is, we live on a planet with finite resources. And it's problematic that we just sort of see it as a place to like extract, extract, extract. So, what happens when we start to value those things that cannot be scaled, that cannot be controlled, that cannot be cultivated? So, just like you're saying, those things that defy that norm, and they are the things that live on the edges. And also with the hedge witch and the kind of history of the hedge witch was like the herbalist, the woman who had that innate knowing through relationship with plants. So it became an embodiment of like the this relationship and the knowing and just this wisdom that came from being part of the plant, right? Connecting with it at that deep level, and therefore becoming the kind of vessel, the container that carried that knowledge. And everyone else in the village didn't have that. And so at a certain point, it became like, oh, we should be afraid of that. We don't have that knowledge, right? So that's where the kind of twist goes. But it was, I mean, she learned all of that by being in direct relationship with it. And she often lived at the edge of town where the hedges were, all of that. But I think it serves as a really good reminder for exactly what you're saying. Like, where do we shift our attention to those things that sort of defy these man-made models that we've made, or that offer as an alternative um, for models of being in the world, that it doesn't have to be everything's like scalable and boxed and all of that kind of thing. Yeah.
100%. And I think what's kind of wonderful is circling back to the animal nature and realizing, like, here we have a model for like just getting back to in the wildness of our bodies, and what is the closest way we can replicate, you know, our original body, like the one that came out into this world relatively untainted, without so many rules placed on it and ideas and poisons, and I think that's what, you know having our little wonderful wolf derived animals, although my dog is like the furthest thing from wolf. We call her the bat pig lovingly because she looks a little bit piggy and she got the oinky snore thing and she has the bat ears. So she's like the most unbelievably furthest creature from a wolf possible. But
I
yeah,
love it.
definitely like a model for embodiment, like just how much she loves to just luxuriate in her rest time. And I'm like, oh, girl,
Yeah.
I'm gonna join you on that couch, girl.
That's
Yeah, girl. Let's both get belly rubs. Paws up.
exactly. Exactly. I love it. I love it. It's so true. It's so true. But it's funny too, like in terms of sort of switching paradigms. I was listening to, I think he's a microbiologist named Compton Rom. I might,
Mm,
and he was describing our microbiome, right? And how all of
mm-hmm.
that works and how we evolved. And first of all, I mean, I think most people know that we are actually the minority human cells. We are the majority bacteria and viruses and, non-human cells. But in the way in which we developed, where it was this collaborative relationship where, in fact, he was like, we can kind of think of ourselves as vessels for that. It's really the bacteria that are in charge here. And they're the ones that are fed first when we eat. They actually help us make vitamins and all that. Where we're getting our nutrition is from the breakdown that the bacteria are doing. But it's like they're the ones running the show. Like they are like the royalty that's kind of manipulating everything. And I just think that that's a really interesting like flip of like, oh my God, like I'm not even this thing. I'm not even operating for this thing. I'm operating for these little microorganisms. Like, and even to the point of like, what are you craving? It's often because that's what the bacteria, that's what your dominant microbiome wants. So it's you're then manipulated into like the carbs or whatever it is. It's just
Totally.
amazing.
My husband and I don't know if you know this, but we were both improv performers for a while.
Oh my
And
God.
every so often we lapse into we totally love this concept of how we are like mostly microbiome or whatever. And so sometimes we'll just give our microbiome voices and imagine what they're saying. Like, I crave a cheeseburger right now. And we're like, no microbiome, bad microbiome. Things get a little crazy in our house. But I love what you said about, realizing that we're just not what we think we are.
Mm-hmm.
We are so much more complex and we have this idea that we are this ego and we're not. And when you start shifting your thinking that way, you're like, oh, my thoughts aren't really my own. I have inherited a whole culture. I have inherited this. My gut is telling me to get a cheeseburger. Who am I?
Exactly. What do I actually desire?
What do I really want?
I mean, we're joking, but let's be honest. Like, those are questions I really struggle with. Like, what do I really want that? Who's the I that's saying that they want that? Like, yeah, totally.
100%. I think that's
Totally.
such a healthy reaction to just moving through your life. Like, okay, why do I want that? Did someone flash this glossy image of somebody who's really
Hmm.
sexy wearing this thing? And am I really going to look that good when I buy that ridiculous? No, girl, put it down. It's not for you.
Get on the couch and have a belly rub. You're good.
That's right. That's right. That's where you belong.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Gigi, something I ask everyone who comes on, and I'd just like to throw this out to you as well, is what do you feel your dog has taught you about what it means to be human?
I think from her, it's the art of really deep connection, like mindful connection. She does not abide if you're hanging out with her and then paying attention to, say, a device, for example. Like she will literally like find a way to like get up into your face.
Yeah.
And then she has these big golden eyes. And I appreciate that because we're so fragmented and distracted and we think all these other things are so much more important and they're not. And so I think that's the biggest thing I have learned from her, that the best thing I can do for myself is just really, have eye contact with
Mhm.
someone and really just kind of lavish attention on them and then receive, because that's what I do with her. We literally just stare into each other's eyes and she lavishes me with that look and I just lavish her with love, and it's amazing. And I mean, if imagine if we treated all our relationships that. I'm not saying you should walk up to everyone and like rub their bellies. That's weird. But, imagine if like what it would be like to every time you're with someone just be like really lean in and just be like, yes, I'm so excited I saw you today. And oh, you know, I love that.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Oh, I love that so much. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience, or any advice that you have, or anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to talk about?
Mm. My chief problem is I could sit here and talk with you forever, but I
Well,
realize we are running out of time.
I'm just going to put this out there. I'm going to be very bold and ask you. I'm going to be really like step into the zone, embody my higher self, and say, would you be willing to come back on another episode at some point?
Oh my God. Yes, of course. I love chatting with you.
Yay. Yay. So that also alleviates my fear of like, I have so many things I want to talk to her about, but I can't.
Oh,
Well,
we're gonna talk, girl.
I
We're
love
gonna
it.
talk. Yeah, I can't wait. I would love that so much. And do I have anything additional to say today? What's the most pressing thing? I can talk about some just a quick thing about how this week I was just really close to giving up on something that I'd spent so much time working on, and I just felt like I was throwing myself at a thing and not getting progress. But I realized I have also been impatient. And I think sometimes you just have to like wait for feedback or signals or
Mm.
just find other things that excite you and light you up. Because I think if you do put a certain amount of energy out there, that's really something that you love and you work on it from a place of love, eventually it does come back to you.
Mhm.
And so I got those love notes today and yesterday. Like, hey, this thing that you've been doing actually has merit. And I think, one of the things that we end up doing as modern humans is we operate on this time scale of instantaneousness when in reality we have to work on this other time scale and remember
Mhm.
that the work takes what it takes and it's slow and eventually good energy comes back to you. And so that's what I want to leave everyone with this week. Like that has been the biggest lesson of the week is hang in there, just keep being excited, keep spreading your love.
I love it. I love it. I can't think of a better way to end this than like love notes from the universe. That is beautiful. So beautiful. Oh
Yay!
my goodness, Gigi, thank you so much for this. If listeners want to reach out to you, are you open to that? And how might they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so if you go to my website, that's gigisilverman.com. From there, it will link you to my Twitter, it'll link you to my Facebook, and I also have an email contact form. And yeah, love to connect if anything resonates with someone. So I
Awesome.
especially love when I've gotten the most amazing friends in the weirdest places as a result of doing things like this. So I'm like, hey, want to be friends? Cool.
Awesome. I love
Let's
it. And
hang out.
awesome. I will include all that information in the show notes too for people. So thank you, Gigi, so, so much. It's been such a pleasure having you on Mystic Dog Mama podcast. Thank you for being here. You are such a
Thank you for
light.
having me. And I look forward to coming back and just soaking up all of your wonderfulness.
Oh, ditto, my friend. All right. Take care. I hope you enjoyed this chat with the multi talented and multi passionate Gigi Silverman as our first guest in the Mystic Dog Mama Spotlight series. She really is such a beautiful soul. What did you take away from this episode? And how do you find magic in your everyday life? I would be over the moon if you sent me a message on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama to let me know. And if you would like to share your story in the Spotlight series, or you have suggestions for another incredible Mystic Dog Mama that you'd like me to feature, let me know. Again, you can message me on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama. And while you're at it, please subscribe to the podcast and let me know what other topics you'd like me to cover to help you live your best Mystic Dog Mama or Papa, life with your own pup. And finally, as we close out 2023, I hope you take Gigi's word of the year, shine, and carry it forward into 2024 in your corner of the world. We can never have too much light. Wishing you a wonderful and happy new year filled with loads of reasons to celebrate. Until next time.